Hello, and welcome to The Alt Left.
Welcome back, everyone, to The Alt Left. This is episode 79. We are almost hitting our 80th, and I am your host, Chris. With me, as always, is the good Reverend Dr. K.
Good evening, everyone.
Matthew Jumbo Johnson.
Hello, everyone, and welcome back.
And we have a guest, intrepid reporter Joe Mayall is here with us today.
Hey, gentlemen. Thanks for having me. Pleasure to be here.
You guys are going to like him. You can definitely check him out on Twitter at Joe Mayall, Joemayall. And at the end of the episode, we'll give him some shameless plug time. But we do want you to go check him out. But Joe is reason he's on is he's actually written some really cool pieces about bacon patrols. We're talking about replacing armed and dangerous police gangs' responses to people in crisis with people who can actually help them, like social workers and counselors, people who aren't going to gun down men with cell phones and children and will actually serve and protect those people. And so we thought, especially going on right now with this Uvalde police shooting videos that have just come out, we should talk about some action we can do for some real heroes. So, Joe, why don't you tell us about it? Like you wrote a whole kick-ass piece about the Denver Star program, and also you wrote a really cool one that I really liked called "Blue Lives Matter More Than Yours," and we'll put a link to it on here. I actually tweeted it earlier. That was just a really good piece on exactly what the problem is. So, why don't I let you put it in your words? So, doing these multiple reports, right? Give us the skinny on what you found and what you think.
Yeah, definitely. Awesome. Yeah. So the first one was a kind of look at what is known as Denver's STAR program, which is Support Team Assistance Response Program. I live in Denver. Anyone who spends time in Denver, and you'll often hear, like, the most pressing visible issue with the city is homelessness, drug abuse. Basically, you don't have to be an expert to suss this out. And so the reason I wrote about this is Denver started this program, which is basically a non-police emergency response unit that responds to, let me quote them here. Each team consists of an EMT and a behavioral health specialist who respond to individuals experiencing crisis related to mental health issues, poverty, homelessness, and substance abuse. So basically, if there's someone doing drugs outside my door or doing some mild trespassing, whatever, and I call 911, who will be sent is a social worker, an EMT, and a behavioral health specialist instead of a cop. Stanford University wrote a report, and the top line is that this program was incredibly successful in its pilot program. That was a 6-month pilot with 2 people in a van. They reduced crime by 34%, and they cost about 25% as much as the cops. So they are more effective and far cheaper than the armed police. And of course, they don't have any of the baggage of, like Chris said, shooting someone who reaches for a cell phone or, tasing a motorist for driving while black or anything like that. So
yeah, I was looking into it, and it looks like, I guess they were averaging it out, and I guess in Denver, for a cop to come out, it's something like $650 per call. Whereas when the STAR program comes out, it's like something like ridiculously low. It's like $134 or some low amount like that. So, I mean, we're talking serious savings. So fiscally, for those of you that actually give a shit and don't care about humans, you just care about money, this is the financial option that makes the most sense. And for those of you that actually, have souls and empathy and actually want to see, solutions to these problems, it works far and away better. And they're underfunded right now, aren't they? Like, they don't have really a big budget. Like you said, it's just people working in a van, right?
Correct. Yeah. You're spot on about the fiscal side. I always kind of hate putting it in terms of monetary value, just because that isn't what our focus should be, right? But yeah. Unfortunately, that's I wasn't accusing you of that. That's just something I think worth is calling out. But yeah, you're right. DPD's Denver Police Department averages $646 per response, and Star is 151, and that's not even factoring the cost of like if DPD shows up and arrests someone. Like I'm pretty. Last number I heard was like about $50,000 to house an inmate a year, something like that. So we're not even getting to that. We're just talking about
that's just for the call for them to come out.
100%. Yeah.
I gotta feel like when you talk about these programs, to people that don't care about the actual people, you have to talk to them about dollars and cents. And because that's the language that they understand, and those are the things that they really care about. So when you go, hey, it saves X amount of dollars that we could use somewhere else to do something else, regardless of what that something else is, that's the only way sometimes to get through to people.
Yeah, and it's real. I mean, let's be fair. Ammunition's expensive, and to pump 60 rounds into the back of an unarmed black man costs a lot of money.
Well, it was more than 60 rounds. More than 60 rounds.
Well, it depends.
I'm just saying.
Tamir Rice only took a few. Like when you're shooting children, it's actually much cheaper.
That's true.
Yeah.
They cover less area.
Yeah, I mean, I'm sure that's going to be the next defense from the Uvalde Police Department also. It's just cutting costs. But
cut out the middleman, so to speak. Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, but the problem I have with this program is it sounds great, but who's going to shoot my dog? I don't think a social worker and a crisis worker is going to. And I'm getting really tired of the woke left not murdering everyone's pets or neighbors.
Yeah, I know. We're just gonna have to find a substitute somehow. You know.
Thanks, Obama.
Yeah. Right. Everything comes back to him.
So now I also want to talk about your seriously awesome piece. The one that really I loved was a piece that was titled "Blue Lives Matter More Than Yours." You're saying you got a lot of pushback from people before they actually read the article and just read the title.
Yeah. So this is a piece I wrote. Like honestly, like when the Uvalde shooting happened, I think like a lot of people, it's just a lot of like, you know, rage and anger and sitting and waiting for the details to come out. And as we now know, like as the details started coming out, like the picture just got worse and worse. And so this piece is just kind of like I think I was honestly just like venting about like what I see as the problem with American policing is that cops inherently, you know, view their lives as more important than other people. Hence the title "Blue Lives Matter More Than Yours." To answer your question, yeah, you know, like I tweeted it out and people would be like, I think taking it at surface level, like "fuck you, man," and then like would come back later with another tweet and being like, "Hey, sorry, I apologize. I just read it. Okay, I like it. Good job." So. Yeah, I tried to basically tie together, and I'd love to hear y'all's thoughts on this. But as we now know, like the Uvalde police basically sat outside and twiddled their thumbs while I think the final death count was 19 children were massacred. And the reason they did that is because they didn't want to get shot. For all the rhetoric, all the Punisher imagery about how they're these rogue tough guys who are willing to like blur the line and be badasses. That's not true. And we saw that wasn't true in Uvalde. We saw that wasn't true in Stoneman Douglas shooting, in Florida, in Columbine. And it's also the reason why, you know, Chris, I think you mentioned Tamir Rice, right? The cop shot Tamir Rice because they, quote unquote, feared he had a gun.
And it was within like, it was like 2.1 seconds or something like that. Like literally the kid didn't have enough time to respond.
Yes.
I'm screaming at you to do something, and before I even finish my sentence and you have a chance to react, I'm shooting you.
Yep,
100%.
That was it.
Well, I think you kind of touched on that in the article. You actually had this line, the one that really resonated with me, because I've actually been talking about this the last few weeks on our cast.
I bet you anything this is going to be the same line I hit.
Probably is where you talk about the image, right, from the school shooting, and you're describing kind of the screen grab of the cop who's going after the parents. And you said, here's the video. Notice the cop in the foreground. His rifle is stashed and his taser is ready. The preference for non-lethal weaponry suggests he views the parents as more of a threat to him than the shooter. And that really touched, because that's what kind of I've been saying. Is like, it's funny how these guys are still, even in this moment where just their absolute cowardice is on display, they will still happily go gung-ho against an unarmed mother. You know, that's who they're going to tase and put in cuffs, you know, and as soon as there's, you know, actual shots getting fired inside, they cower and hide like the absolute, you know, bastards they are. And I mean, and again, we let them get away with this at all times. It's always like, well, the cop's life was in danger. The cop was in fear for his life. He's got a duty to go home to his family. It's like, can you imagine going to a hospital and being like, I'm sick, and the doctor's like, well, you're sick, stay home, get the fuck out of here. I got a wife and kids at home. I don't want to bring them home the flu. What the fuck's wrong with you? And like, no, this is a hospital. I'm here for help. Like, hey, get help somewhere else, bitch. I'm here to fucking give out drugs. Like, no. You get your sick ass out of the hospital. We don't want you here. You know, and doctors and nurses cowering from COVID patients. Like, you don't see that. You see every other first responder. I mean, you see EMTs driving ambulances into literally gang shootouts to get people. You see firefighters doing 2 in, 2 out, running into burning buildings with, you know, still strapping on their safety gear to save kids inside of buildings. You see doctors and nurses. I mean, we watched at the beginning of COVID, we watched doctors and nurses with fucking garbage bags over their bodies to protect them and working insane, thankless shifts to try to save lives around the world. Not even the United States, globally. First responders do this. This is naturally around the world. The firefighters in the U.S. are the same as firefighters in the fucking Philippines or in Mexico or in Finland. Like, it doesn't matter where you go. People who rescue humans out of burning buildings will value innocent life and will risk theirs to do that. That's the job. If you can't do that, you don't sign up for it. And that's with all jobs, with the exception of cops. We say you have ultimate authority, you carry weapons, and we're also going to make this people who are apparently we're supposed to believe are safeguarding us, and we're going to let you value your lives above ours. And we don't allow that with any other first responder profession, but here we go. We see it on display, and it's rare to see both happen simultaneous, where they're both hiding and cowering from duty, but then to keep the status quo, will happily tase the shit out of an unarmed mother.
Yeah, that's a great analogy about doctors. I had never thought of it, but it's almost grotesquely comical thinking of a doctor like that. Yeah, you're right. That those videos of the Uvalde police tasing, handcuffing, detaining the parents who are begging them to save their kids. One mother actually ran in, got out of the handcuffs somehow, jumped a fence, and saved her 2 kids. There's just no bigger indictment. And I'm not a religious person. If I was, I would be thinking oh, this is God just being here is everything wrong with the current system, right in front of you. It's on camera. You have the quote unquote stats you need to put in the newspaper, 19 dead, how many wounded. It's almost comical. Uvalde PD had done active shooter drills with this squad at this school. It could not be more obvious. And I think my frustration is shared with a lot of people. This is a podcast, so if you can't tell, I'm white. I think this frustration is probably 10 times what I'm feeling in, communities of color and Black communities, because a lot of the stuff I talk about in the article is about how, like you said, every time a cop shoots an unarmed Black guy, it's, oh, well, I was scared for my life. And our collective response as a society should be tough shit, man. Get a different job if you're scared for your life, right? I work on the computer all day. There's plenty of jobs like that. Go get one. You don't get to, like you said, sign up to be a doctor and then be whoa, I didn't know there'd be needles involved. No one told me this.
Look, I want to be a roofer, but I'm afraid of heights, and I just think it's fucked up that you're making me go up there.
Yeah, so you shoot someone who asked you to go up the ladder to your roof. What the fuck are we talking about? Basic job description, line 1.
Well, and the cop who was on his phone, right? The one who's been, nailed for having the Punisher logo because he's such a badass, right?
Yeah.
That guy's wife was getting shot.
Yeah.
Wife was getting not only do we have is he in this situation where it's ridiculous that he's not acting, we're unarmed people, we're happy to go in and act, his wife was literally being murdered while this was going on in that school, and he could not be bothered. I'm sorry, anyone I loved, I don't care if my boss was you can't do that, I tell my boss to go fuck themselves. That's the thing we always hear. It's well, it's the job. It's a job. You're allowed to quit anytime you want. It's why I don't respect cops, even quote unquote the good ones, because you can walk away anytime you want. You're not a slave. They didn't give you a kidney. Like, it's a job. They pay you money and they give you a job and you can walk away. And the problem is, the reason they don't is because where the fuck else is a D student who barely made it through high school date rapist going to get a job that pays him 6 figures? You're not. If you don't believe me, Google 40% of cops, and you can find out exactly what the police force is up to.
Well, and even the ones that don't, by the way, even the ones that don't make 6 figures, the places they live, what they make is equivalent to making 6 figures where they live, because the cost of living is so low. So
Yeah,
I don't want to, just to get ahead of anybody that's being, well, I live in bumfuck Idaho and the cops here only make $60K a year. Yeah, in bumfuck Idaho, that's fucking 6 figures.
That's enough to buy a house.
Yeah.
Like, that's the thing, is that trope of, well, it's not much on an honest cop salary. It's like, no, cops make good money. And here's the thing. I'm okay with first responders making money. I'm okay with firefighters making good money. I think it's a crime how little we pay EMTs. I am A+ 100% on board. Pay first responders. First responders and teachers should be the highest earners in the fucking nation.
Yep.
Right?
Absolutely.
After that, add reporters, social workers, people who actually contribute and create an informed and better society. These are people who safeguard society. They should be paid. I am fine with cop salary. I'm not fine with what we have as an institution of policing. And that salary helps keep the absolute worst people on board, because where the fuck else are these stupid cowards going to find a job like that?
Yeah.
Yeah, I agree. It's one of those things where, like you said, like totally, like first responders should be making the most money. I always use this metric of I have a cush marketing job, so I sit at home and send emails all day. Right, it's very important. Sarcasm.
He is hiring.
And I always think about it's an indictment of capitalism and our country if I'm making more than a public servant, a teacher, a nurse, anyone like that. But you're right. It is, and I'd love to hear y'all's thoughts on this. I struggle with it, whether it's a nature or a nurture thing with cops, as if, do we think this job is attracting the people who are more prone to want to seek power, or do we think that once you get into the academy, there's this culture of telling you have you guys ever seen the video of the, I don't know what you'd call him, lecturer who goes around and tells cops how to be a lethal killer to protect himself?
Yeah,
that stuff. Yeah. I go back and forth of whether good-hearted people can enter this system and then go through that ringer and then come out the other side, with one hand already on the trigger, or if current policing is just sort of attracting these people.
So the answer is yes. It's both. Yeah, it is absolutely both.
Listen to episode 77.
Yeah. We actually had so we've had 2 people on so far that actually went through basic training, or the academy of basic training. They went through the same thing basically, but they went through the academy, and one of them didn't even make it into the academy. He's like, this is awful. I can't do this. I have a conscience. The other one made it out of the academy. We just had him on. That's what Chris is talking about. Made it out of the academy, lasted, I think, 10 days. And he was like, nope, I'm out. Now, and this is anecdotal. I mentioned this before. I am friends with a cop. Now, I do believe he's one of the quote unquote good ones. However, I now have learned for a fact that his entire career is basically been relegated. He's never going to advance. He's never going to get promoted. He's been skipped over and over again. And the reason why is because he's actually spoken out against people that he's found being racist and being horrible. And it's the same situation that Chris was talking about. Where's he going to go? Dude's got a wife and kids. Dude's not going to make what he's making anywhere else, even without the promotion. He's guaranteed to constantly get raises and things like that. He's stuck. So I think that's the more on the what you get on the decent guy side. I think it's one of those 2 things. Either their conscience doesn't allow them to stay in, or they get into a situation like this where they're ostracized even within their own community, right? Then the flip side is what you were talking about. You've got these, basically what Chris said, these D-student date rapist jock boys who couldn't find a job elsewhere. They couldn't get recruited by a college to play sports or something. They needed somewhere to go. And lo and behold, there's, sheriffs, cops, policing, corrections. That's another big one for these assholes. Like
Border
some form-
Patrol.
Border
Yeah.
Patrol,
Yep.
Yeah.
all that shit. And here's the thing: these institutions recruit from these assholes. It's no different than any military institution. They go out and look specifically for these kinds of people because they know that they're gonna fucking shut their mouths, do what they're told, and be indoctrinated into this. They're prone to this kind of thing. And then I think there's absolutely a second, a third or fourth one, if you will. I think there's absolutely the quality of a good person who's just not strong enough to resist it and eventually starts drinking the Kool-Aid, and you go in and eventually you come out and you're just as bad as the date rape drug D students. Like, I think all of that happens.
Yeah,
Yeah,
I think there's definitely a mix of both, because I do believe that policing and military do tend to recruit the knuckle draggers, right? Again, these are jobs that do not require an ounce of intelligence, and in fact, an ounce of intelligence is a detriment. Questioning orders, questioning systems that are going on are not allowed. And again, there's almost understandable to it. Like, you're for the military, you need to fucking follow goddamn orders right away. If someone can't be like, hey, go over, quick, run a quarter mile this way to save your life. You can't sit around and go, why? It's because there's a fucking artillery coming in, dude. Run! Like, it's understandable why you need a knee-jerk, not questioning orders, but so you already need, and again, that's most people. Like, let's be real. A majority of people do not question much of authority. Until, and the only time you find questioning of authority in large amounts of people is when you have popularized mass movements, right? So, like, right now, people are definitely questioning our government, our foreign policy, our policing, but that's because it's become popular this decade. Before that, very few were. I have hated cops since I was a teenager, but I was in a vast minority. Now, suddenly, I find myself in a majority of Americans who don't trust police officers. And so I think most people aren't willing to simply just be like, screw everything about my own culture and society. And I'm going to hate this thing or question this thing or say, why should I do this? Or not listen to my boss. Again, I'm not saying like it's 1%, but a majority do not do that. And that's because that's how humans have evolved. Like, we are the top of the food chain because we work well together in groups and we follow social norms. That's why cognitive dissonance exists. We've talked about this ad nauseum on this podcast. But I think that's only a small part of it. So I do definitely think it already recruits people who are not big brain energy, right? But the big thing is there has been experiment and study after study after study that has shown it does not matter who you are. The average person, and again, there will always be dissenters, but the average human being will commit atrocities if told to do so. And again, I don't like using the Stanford prison experiment because the Stanford prison experiment is bullshit. It has been disproven a million times. It was it wasn't a hoax, but it was definitely a hacked experiment, right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
But there's
it was not a good
other one, the electricity one.
The thing is,
right?
Yes, there's many of them. I think it's just lots of studies. And actually, again, I've recommended this on the show before. There's a book called Ordinary Men that I recommend everyone in the world read this book. And I know it's a history book, so I know you're not going to want to read it, but it's not that long. It's really good, and it actually follows a brigade of Polish police. Nazi police. So basically, the not Germans, when they invaded Poland, sent a bunch of Germans into Poland to be cops. And these guys weren't regularly cops. These guys were masons and field workers and fucking newspaper salesmen, like whatever. They were just random dudes who just needed some work because, their city was getting bombed. And so they signed up to be cops in occupied Poland, right? So they got sent off. And they went through training, the thing, and then immediately were like, okay, it's time to kill all the Jews. And everyone was just like, what the fuck? And like, there's, these are written accounts of them saying like how horrified they were. And they were just like, here's a town, massacre everyone. And literally in the opening of this, the commander says, anybody who can't stomach this, opt out right now. Nothing bad will happen to you. But now's your chance. And like 2 guys were like us. And they were like, okay, yeah, cool. We'll put you on light duty. We'll put you somewhere else. And they went back to the barracks. And they had like be cooks and stuff, And that was it. Nothing bad happened to them. And after seeing that, still the rest of the men were like, well, orders are orders. And they went in, and then they literally, they burned babies, and they shot women in the back of the head. They had an entire execution method where they had to adjust their bayonets, and they were taught the right way to put your bayonet at the base of the skull so that the bullet would go right through the head, the right portion, and it wouldn't blow brains back onto your face when you were shooting people in a ditch and all this. And it starts in the very after they do their first massacre. These guys go back to the barracks, and like no one wants to eat. They're all like, "Oh, what the fuck have we done?" This is kind of none of them are saying this, but there's this kind of feeling of trauma. And then a week later they get sent to another village, and now they're starting to just it's business as usual, and not a single person dissents, not a single person asks to be opt out, which anyone can at any time. And they start just doing it until by the end of their adventure, they were playing games like having the Jew hunt, where they'd go into the woods and release people and chase them down to rape and murder them. One of the brigade captains writes a letter about how he was so mad because he's hanging out with his wife who's visiting him, and one of the guy knocks on his door and he says, "I haven't had my breakfast yet," and by that he means he hasn't killed a Jew yet today. And his wife was horrified. It's all this, and this all resulted from a post-war investigation into how the fuck did this happen. And it follows this one brigade because it's the only brigade where there is so much written. There's an insane amount of documentation, but there's all of these from that war and from many wars. There's a lot of this stuff from Vietnam. Hell, if you watch the movie Platoon, it's about this. And that's a glorified good guy rendition of it. Most times there's all these accounts of people who should have been tried for war crimes in Vietnam who went on rape and murder sprees. And the whole fucking platoon just went along with it because that's human nature. You are told to do something, regardless of what it is, by an authority figure, you will do it. And when you have an organization like policing, right, that has nationwide unions, incredible purchasing power, incredible lobbying power, striking cops, even though it's technically not supposed to be legal, they do. They have their blue flus, right? And they can strike for things. And all of a sudden you have people who aren't accountable because look at Arizona. In Arizona, they just passed a law this week, statewide, that you cannot film a police officer conducting police business within 8 feet of him, right? So if you are the subject of this, you could no longer film your own arrest. Secondly, if somebody else is filming, say from across the street, all it takes is one cop to run over to them and close that gap. Now they're within 8 feet. They can be instantly arrested and tried. Even though they were 30 feet away, all the cop has to do is run over and get within 8 feet. They're recording within 8 feet, and now they're in cuffs. Most police accountability councils, right? I'm forgetting the word here. Half of them are cops, and the ones who are civilians are oversight boards. The civilians on the oversight boards are bootlickers. They are spouses of cops. They are ex-cops, and we have police policing themselves. It's this unaccountability cycle of the worst people being commanded to do the worst things with no accountability, and then being praised as heroes by half the country for what they do.
Yeah. And anyone that questions it, they're the ones that are wrong. I think one of the best memes, I don't know if you guys watch this, but like Brooklyn Nine-Nine, John C. McGinley, who played Perry Cox in Scrubs, plays the union rep for the cops. And it's supposed to be a joke, but I've never seen anything that I think rings more true, where it's like the cops are doing something bad and the union rep is like, "No, you're the victim. It's everybody else that's got a problem. Why are they anti-cop? Why do they hate the cops? Why? I mean, yeah, sure, you raped and murdered someone, but that's what you needed to do your fucking job. Why is everyone else anti-cop? Because you're doing your job." And that's exaggeration, but not by much. That's the kind of spin these people are getting. And it's not just from union reps. It's from their superiors. It's from their friends. It's this cliquish thing. I mean, yes, the authority figure is going to be the leader that tells them to do it, and they'll acquiesce to that. But all you need is like 3 or 4 other guys that are gung-ho about it too. And suddenly anyone that's not with those guys is ostracized from the group.
Yeah.
This whole system is designed to take advantage of human nature and force people into complying with this behavior. Like Chris said, to the point where eventually you do it so much that it becomes normalized. And that's another thing. It's like, we're adaptable. Human beings, one of the reasons we've been able to survive is because we can adapt to any situation. Like, it doesn't matter what situation we're put in. We could be homeless. We could literally have, there's a great movie that my wife and I recently watched called Love and Monsters, which is literally a meteor strikes and every fucking ant and lizard in the fucking planet becomes
That
a fucking
movie's
Godzilla
awesome.
monster. It is. And humans adapt and survive. And again, the reason I bring it up is because our very natures program us to be able to take whatever fucking bullshit situation we're in and make the best out of it. So in a situation like with policing, even somebody that goes in for all the right reasons and swears up and down that they are not going to let this system or any of this horrible shit turn them, it's two choices. You either have to accept that you're going to be the one person that everyone in the fucking precinct hates, do your 20 years and then get out on your retirement, quit, or become part of the pack. Those are your options.
And they're all
You have no
garbage.
choice. They all suck. But here's the thing. The one where you become part of the pack, at least you got friends. At least you're getting
Yep.
pay. At least you're getting advanced. You've got a
Yep.
whole community of people that are telling you this is okay.
Yeah. Yeah, that's well said. I think you guys are spot on about kind of the psychology behind this. And I think that's a really important message that like we should be very vocal about, because I think, I'm willing to bet like the majority of Americans like have some sort of personal relationship with a cop, whether an uncle or a friend or whoever. I certainly do. And I think like, when someone hears a message of like, oh, defund the police, or like we need to basically replace this system entirely, their first response is like oh no, well, my Uncle Bob is a great guy and he's a cop and he wouldn't do that. And I think really explaining to them like the psychology is, as you guys just walked through, is a much easier way to understand how like, yeah, maybe their Uncle Bob is super nice to them and like shows up to Thanksgiving with a smile and buys them the best Christmas presents. But when it's him and four other officers, pulling over a car at 2:00 in the morning, like that's where like that psychology takes over. I think the best example of this is I cannot get this image out of my head of, I believe it was Buffalo, New York during the 2020 uprisings, the George Floyd protests, where
the cop that shoved the old man.
Yep. And after a quote unquote serious internal investigation, the cop was put on, I believe it was paid leave, and all 67 officers in his unit resigned in protest. Like, he is on video pushing over an old man who cracks his head and begins to bleed out of his skull. The rest of the cops step over him like he's a piece of trash, and the cops thought that they were the victim there, right? Like, if you had polled all those people, they would have said, oh yeah, no, I'm the victim. That cop was a quote unquote left-wing Antifa agitator, whatever. Like, just like that Brooklyn Nine-Nine sketch, rated R. We were talking earlier about the few bad apples thing. And one of the reasons I hate that phrase is I think it's actually 100% wrong. I think it's the other way around. I think there are these pockets of like decent people in an overall rotten system.
The problem with that phrase is that it's half a fucking phrase.
Yeah.
The whole thing is a few bad apples spoils the bunch. The whole point of that phrase is to let people know it doesn't matter if it's just a few bad apples, because a few bad apples corrupt everything. And I mean, it blows me away that we as a society, we do this so much as we cut shit down. It's the same thing with the fucking customer is always right thing. It's the customer is always right in terms of fashion or something like that.
It matters of taste.
It matters of taste. Yeah. It means if the customer wants to buy something fucking ugly, you let him buy something fucking ugly, not give the shitty asshole Karen whatever the fuck she wants because she's a bitch. Like, we've completely twisted these sayings around to fit a narrative that they were never meant to represent. It's just insane to me.
Yeah, Matt, it's like pull yourself up by your bootstraps. Like, that's supposed to be like your bootstraps are below you. It's supposed to be like self-defeating, and then people will like look at a homeless guy on the street and be like, come on, man, pull yourselves up by your bootstraps, and think that they're in the right? Like, it's insane.
My favorite one, this is off topic, but the one that just it just frosts my weenie every time is blood is thicker than water. That one drives me mad because blood is thicker than water is always colloquially said. as your family is more important than acquaintances and friends. And the actual saying is the blood of the covenant is thicker than the water of the womb, meaning the
The
friendships
opposite is
and
true.
family that you make with people you're not related to is far more important than people you're with solely based on the womb.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And it's the same thing. But yeah, even let's just pretend, right, that bad apples, it's just about, let's just pretend the phrase is simply, oh, I don't like bad apples. Like, let's just pretend, like, let's just say that's the saying, right? It doesn't matter. The point is, like, it's all bad apples. Like, okay, your good Uncle Bob who shows up to Thanksgiving and always brings the good wine, right? And he's so nice to you and he's good with the kids and whatever. And it's like, again, first of all, 40% chance he's beating the shit out of his wife at home. Number two, if he's not, and again, this is 40%, by the way, reported. But if he's not, then he's part of the other percentage covering it up. That's the thing. And I again, it's been years. This is a good, God, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10 years old. I can't remember how long ago this shooting was. But there was a shooting caught on camera. Someone filmed it from like across the street. The cops didn't even know they were being filmed. And they do a stop. Black guy jumps out of the car and runs away, right? Just jumps out, doesn't point anything. He doesn't like have a hoagie under his arm they thought was a gun, no, nothing. He just turns and is like, fuck this, and runs away from them. A white cop immediately pulls a gun out and shoots him in the fucking back and kills him. They then go over to the body, search the body, and when there's nothing to be found, his partner, a black cop, pulls out a gun and places it on the ground after rubbing the guy's hand on it. Plants the weapon. This was caught on video. This happens all the time. And that's the thing. It's like, yeah, your Uncle Bob might not be willing to shoot a man in the back, but your Uncle Bob is more than happy to cover up the crimes of those who do. And that's literally just as bad. This is why we have accomplice laws. You don't have to run into the bank with a gun to be a bank robber. If you're the getaway driver, you're part of the bank robbing team. And the best cops, if you wake up and you put a badge on and go into work, you are an accomplice. Doesn't matter what you do. I don't care if you are IA. I don't care if you're a paper pusher who works a desk. I don't care if you're a training officer. I don't care if you're public outreach, and all you do is organize the Kiss a Pig Day every year. Like, whatever it is, I don't care. Like, if you are part of this system, every single job in this system exists to support itself, right? Like, no matter what you do at Boeing, your job is to help lift planes in the air. You might not be an aircraft engineer. You might not be a pilot. You might not work ground crew. Maybe you're a maintenance guy who helps swab toilets. But you still support the system and do labor to increase the system of making planes exist, right? And it's the same thing. And if planes are awful, then everyone in that system is accountable. And every single sworn peace officer is either a cold-blooded killer or backs up, supports, and covers and trains and helps cold-blooded killers.
Yeah, that's well said, Chris. And I don't know what else, bringing it back to Uvalde, I struggle to articulate this because what else do we need to see to understand this, right? How many, I think last I heard there was 60 cops on scene during the shooting, and they're all radio in, talking to dispatch, right? Calling different agencies. No one is saying what the fuck are you doing? Get in there now. It doesn't matter if you die. That's a school. Go. No one says that. And I don't know. It's so deep in our psyche to trust, oh, cops are the good guys, right? We think of them like firemen and postal workers and the fucking milkman and this old school 1950s image.
This Norman Rockwell view.
Yeah, and you were talking about the military earlier, and there's real deep roots between the American military and police force, and that is how they see themselves. They see themselves as an occupying army, the quote unquote thin blue line between order and chaos, and they can do no wrong. They are the law. And I that's, if anyone's listening to this who would consider themselves pro police or doesn't agree with my assessment of the problem, like I'd ask for an explanation to the Uvalde shooting or those 67 cops who all resigned in protest in Buffalo. Like, what else do you need to see to understand that, like, we really need to tear down and rebuild policing from the ground up? And policing, when I say policing there, what I really mean is like community safety, like the STAR program that we opened with. It's incredibly effective. It's what this city needs. And we're all just stuck in this echo chamber of cops can do no wrong. Therefore, when they let 19 kids die, it's actually, I don't know, there was too many doors on the school or whatever the fuck we're saying today. Fire exit wasn't locked or something.
Well, I mean, and that's the thing. It's nothing is going to happen. The people that are still on the side of cops at this point, nothing is there. There aren't going to be enough dead children, enough dead black people, enough dead brown people for them to ever change their position at this point. Because I mean, look what every time we learn, Uvalde, I think, is the perfect storm of proof for everything that anyone has been on the anti-cop has been saying. Like, I mean, Chris, you as being somebody who's been anti-cop from the beginning, like anything you've ever said about cops was shown to be true in this thing. They didn't protect anyone. They harmed the citizens that were trying to protect the children. They were just standing around. They had all the weapons and all the team that they could possibly have, didn't do anything. They practiced with this team at this school for this situation 2 months prior. Like everything that the pro-cop people have been saying we need in order to prevent this stuff, these cops had, did, and got. And still, we had dead kids. Right down to the Punisher thing. And we've joked about this before, but like the Punisher meme has always been stupid because the Punisher is
Punisher hates cops.
The most anti-cop Marvel character in existence is the fucking Punisher. So it's already stupid that they did this. But what is the Punisher? He's a vigilante who kills bad guys. If there was ever a time for a cop to live up to the Punisher moniker, it was during this fucking shooting. And the guy with the fucking Punisher background on his phone was sitting there just on his phone while his wife and a bunch of kids got murdered. Like
texting his wife, by the way. So he's sitting there, and to distract himself from the sound of screaming and dying children, he's talking to his wife, who has also been shot and is dying. He's like, oh man, someone should do something about this.
Yeah. And so anybody with more than 2 brain cells rubbed together can look at this and say, we've got a problem.
Don't do that. It's very bad for your brain.
Yeah, it is. It hurts. It starts fires. But like anybody else who doesn't want to see this, they will either allow themselves to be brainwashed by the right-wing narrative of this, or they will simply go back to just a few bad apples. Anytime this happens, it'll be that precinct was bad. Mine isn't like that. All these other ones aren't like this. They'll quote some number like we have 1,000 precincts, and out of all of them, this is the one. And then next week we'll have another precinct where this happens and another one. Like, and I don't even think that matters. I think we could have an incident every single day at every single precinct in the United States like this. And the people that are still on the side of cops would continue to be on the side of cops. They would just find something new to defend this with.
Well, but that's because policing isn't just about policing, right? It gets part of a grander narrative. It's kind of like the January 6th hearings, right? Like, first of all, man, how fucking weird is it to be rooting for Liz Cheney? That's just, if that doesn't put the cherry on the we are in the fucking bizarro timeline, I don't know what else is.
We're in the alternative timeline, man. Someone went back in time and fucked with some shit. We are, yeah.
Weasel theory, baby. It was the weasel. It was the Hadron Collider weasel.
The Hadron Collider, yep.
Yep. Yeah, we went from a dark timeline to the darkest, hands down. But like, the thing is again, it's that narrative. So it's like the January 6th hearings. Like everyone's like, oh, well, now they're gonna know. It's like it's not gonna fucking change anyone's minds, right? If you are of the idea that Trump is a fascist, his followers are traitors, and that an armed mob of fucking fascists stormed the Capitol, tried to overthrow the government to install a dictatorship happened. All right, this is just porn. And if you are of the idea that is not what happened, that it was either patriots just, mad about a fraud election, or it was Antifa and Snuffleupagus doing it in disguise, then your mind is not going to be changed because you're a fucking QAnon who thinks JFK is going to rise from the dead and put Trump back in office. Like, the amount of bizarro fucking mental leaps you need to take to still be supporting this at this point, there is no hearing from Congress. Because again, you're stuck in this feedback loop of conspiracy theories, right? It is a self-feeding machine. It's like, well, Congress has shown that this is evidence. Well, yeah, but it's from Congress. Can't trust those guys. That's the swamp. Can't do that. And it's like there becomes.
What about all these independent third parties?
No, you can't trust any of them. No, it is the no true Scotsman logical fallacy. Yeah, it's the no true Scotsman fallacy. It's all it is. There is no any source that does not confirm to your belief is not trustworthy, and any source that does, regardless of actual facts, is an insider. And it's the same thing. It's because it's a myth. It is a Donald Trump is the greatest thing, and he's gonna fucking save us all. Right? And Democrats are baby-eating pedophiles who hang out in pizza shops. Like, that is just the narrative you have, and it cannot change because you are emotionally invested in it, right? That narrative has become part of your identity. And it's the same with this cop thing. It's like you have to believe that cops are here to do good. And sure, there's some bad apples, but most cops are good people. And the real problem is Antifa and those damn darkies. Like, that is the narrative, and it's fucked up and it's wrong, but you have to have it to sleep well at night because you are absolutely terrified because things are getting worse and your white privilege is starting to fade. And that is a problem. Equality is scary to a white supremacist because you are hinging everything you have on you being a superior class of citizen. And so anything to even the playing field or cause any reform is terrifying because your entire belief structure exists that you need to be at the top. Even if you don't want to say that out loud, that's what it is. And this narrative of cops have to be the good guys because if they're not, what are we going to do? It's like, again, January 6th happened. And everyone's like, the cops are actually fighting us. This is bullshit. I can't believe it. It's like, you didn't think the Capitol Police were going to take umbrage with people storming the Capitol. I mean, again, and they barely did. One person got shot. It is amazing. I don't know how the fuck they... Again, we had armed guards at the Lincoln Memorial when BLM did a peaceful march. But fucking literally armed rioters stormed the Capitol on January 6th. And there's video. You see the cops helping all the old ladies down the stairs and wishing everyone a good day and taking selfies with them. And even the occasions where they got pepper sprayed or pushed back, they're like, I can't, the cops are against us. Can you fucking believe this? And they were just awestruck because the idea that a police officer could not be serving your white interest and that your white, comfortable, straight, cisgendered Republican interest could not be the national interest is just does not compute, can't handle it. And I think that's why.
That's insane. Like, well said. Like, I know this has been said before, but like, imagine if that was a Black Lives Matter protest that came within 100 feet. If it was like, I don't know, 5 black people who came within 100 feet of the Capitol, like all the snipers on the roof and everything would have just, it would have been a completely different story. And
well, imagine if one of them had a cantaloupe that looked like a handgun.
Yeah, 100%. And then people are surprised when a white woman is breaking literally into the congressional chamber, like with people who have bombs and zip ties and stuff. And they're like, why'd they shoot her? Like, she was innocent. It's like,
which, by the way, she got warned like fucking 50 times.
Oh my God.
Like,
they don't,
the dude was desperate to not shoot her. He was trying everything he possibly could to not have to shoot this woman. And it was literally the way he treated her was how all cops should be treating any black man ever. But
Ashley Babbitt got what she deserved, and so she got exactly what she was looking for.
I'm not you guys have read what I wrote. Like, it takes a lot for me to be like, yeah, the cops probably should have shot that person. Like, breaking in to do a coup with a bomb is probably you don't get to complain when that happens. You got what you're asking for at some level.
All these white Nazi mass murderers, I would have no problem if those guys got shot, but all of them managed to get taken in peacefully.
They always seem to make it in.
Yeah.
The cops got Dylan Roof Burger King after it was 2008 after he killed 6 people in a black church,
right? Yeah.
Yep. And said, I killed them because they were black. Like, that is why I killed him. The cops fucking bought him Burger King.
Yeah,
because
we're
to
gonna
them,
give you a look to the precinct with a hot meal. Here you go.
here's your fucking Happy Meal toy, kid. Like, it's insane. Yeah.
I mean, dude, Kyle Rittenhouse murdered people in the middle of a street, and the cops just drove by him as he's holding a rifle.
Yeah.
And then half the
right
nation
through a
defended him.
barricade.
Yeah. Well,
Yeah.
to be fair, he didn't have any of that scary melanin that needs to be kept out. But let's also, real quick, if we're going to talk about things like January 6th and that kind of thing, remember, just like how it's not good to be in this two-party loop of vote blue no matter who, Republican till I die, like, investigate things that aren't just this two-way. Everything is not black and white. Everything is not bicameral. Just because the January 6th was a group of Nazis trying to create a fascist takeover of the government does not make the FBI the good guys. Stop fucking rooting for them.
Yeah, for real.
Yeah. Speaking of, I mean, I'm going like a little bit off track here, but like watching the Democrats and the Republicans shift between the FBI and the CIA are good guys and bad guys depending on which way the wind blows, like, it's giving me whiplash. It's one of those things where, like, I don't know, like you said, and we could do a whole nother episode on that of like vote blue no matter who. It's one of those things where I think we like just need to be staunch and like clearly saying like, hey, just because a broken clock is right twice a day doesn't mean you trust the clock. Like, that's not the moral of the story.
Everyone should watch Rambo 3 and watch Sylvester Stallone's speech at the end about how the Mujahideen and the Taliban are the freedom fighters that America needs. It's so good. That explains American foreign policy better than anything in the world.
Yeah. Spot on. Yeah. And like, to bring it back to like what we started our conversation with is like, one of the things one of the articles I wrote was just frustration. The other one is, you know, showing people that it doesn't have to be this way, that like, we don't like, I think part of it is like, one, all the stuff you talked about like, you know, there's definitely an element of like, oh, I supported the cops 10 years ago, so I'm digging my heels in and I'm never going to admit I'm wrong. There's also, I think, this element of like, you know, people can't envision the alternative of like, well, if we get rid of the cops and there will only be the robbers and it's going to be like chaos in the streets and everything. And that's not true, right? Like,
at all. We saw that in New York. That happened in New York. The cops got pissy because they were told they can't fucking profile black men anymore. And they were like, okay, we're just not going to respond to anything that isn't an emergency. And you know what happened? Crime rates dropped, and everyone got along fine. There were no problems. Literally.
Yeah.
Yeah, it was amazing how the cops come out and they literally made the statement. The union made the statement, we're not going to arrest people we don't absolutely have to. And it's like, why wasn't that already the plan?
What have you been doing this whole time? Yeah. I know. It's this Stanford study that came out about the Denver Star program, like, explicitly goes out of its way to refute the notion of broken windows policing. That's the theory that like you need to arrest people for low level crimes, otherwise they will do high level crimes. And there's a lot of like very scientific, smart people stuff that I'm going to sound like an idiot if I try and explain.
It's pretty fucking common sense that oppressing poor people is not the way to stop white collar crime.
Yeah, and they like, it's one of those things, right? Like, Chris, you just said it out loud, and like that should be common sense. And like the researchers here are like comparing the different remittance rates between like the districts and everything to like bring this like quote unquote like fact-based, you know, how we were talking about with pricing in the beginning, how you have to prove everything as opposed to just saying like, hey, we shouldn't lock people up for 10 years for jumping a subway turnstile or something. Like, I'm sure we can link it in the show notes. It's definitely worth a read because it like they explicitly go out of their way to say like this ideology is bullshit and this program disproves it.
Well, yeah, and not to mention like what we do already know, like this has been known for fucking ever, is the moment you're in the system, all it does is it becomes a revolving door. It turns you into a better criminal that escalates. So the moment they get you in for jumping a turnstile, you're done. you're fucked. You like, you've got a record, you've been in prison. How are you going to find your job? How are you going to vote? Like, we take away everything that allows you to be a functioning member of society. Yet while you're in prison, you learn all kinds of nifty skills on how to be a better criminal. Well, when you go back into society and you can't fucking join it, what else are you going to do to live? Like, we know this happens. Like, it doesn't take a brain surgeon to figure this out.
Well, and our prisons have been declared inhumane by the UN already. Like, that thing is like not even like you learn criminal skills. I don't give a fuck. Crime is directly related to poverty. Crime is an abject result of capitalism and poverty. If you eliminate poverty, you eliminate most crime. End of story. If you give people health care, help for drug addictions, psychological care, roofs over their head, and food to fucking eat, all of a sudden crime fucking drops. End of story. And prisons are hellholes of rape and violence and gang activity.
Yeah. There's I can't remember his name, but I know there was a recent story of a black kid in New York City. I think he was 17, 16, something like that. Jumped a turnstile, got arrested, and basically got buried in like the Rikers Island like bureaucration.
Yeah,
ended
and
up killing
he never got his court date. Yeah.
He couldn't afford bail. Ended up killing himself after 2 years in probably, one of the most hellish places to live. Like I know this isn't a conversation about foreign policy, but I always like one of the things I try and get across in my foreign policy writing is, we don't have a lot of legs to stand on when we're condemning other nations' human rights abuses.
We have none.
Yeah.
We have 25% of the world's prison population. 13%, African Americans make up 13% of the world prison population, despite being like less than 1% of the world's population. It's like I don't know how you can start pointing fingers when like we're the ones imprisoning people. Like
it's easy when you're a bunch of white people that just blame all the African Americans. Like that's how you do it.
And the book that is famous for pointing this out is called The New Jim Crow. It's a really good fucking read. It's another book everyone should read. The New Jim Crow is amazing, and it kind of points out how it's systematic. It is from the top down. Black neighborhoods are over-policed. Even though black people and white people commit drug crime at the same rate, black people are like 5 times more likely to be arrested. And then when in court, 7 times more likely to be convicted and will face almost double the prison time for the same crime. It is every single stage of the criminal justice system is an absolute failure and oppressive system towards anyone of color. And it's not one thing. It's not just the cops, not just the courts, not just the laws. It's all of it. We have a system. Again, it's like, what else do you expect from a system that was built on chattel slavery?
Yeah.
And then went to convict leasing. Like, no shit. And the United States is hands down. Again, I'm not the world's expert, but historically, the United States is probably hands down the most evil empire that has ever existed. Nazi Germany has nothing on the United States. And I know that sounds fucking hyperbolic. It is not. You want to talk about the Holocaust? Let's talk about the genocide of Native Americans who lived here. Because you can't even fucking compare them to what Nazi Germany did. You want to talk about the Gestapo? You want to talk about their secret police? Let's talk about what the FBI and CIA have done in our own borders, regardless of the regime change and fucking giant rape squads and armies we've sent across the world. Let's talk about us participating in massive starvation genocides in India and Pakistan. Like, let's talk about how we're responsible for the starvation that's going on right now in Sri Lanka. United States companies forcing them to quote unquote and bribing their officials to go organic for some weird fucking vanity play has caused starvation right now. That's happening now. We have concentration camps on our border. We have a torture prison in Cuba. We barricade Cuba, keep them from fucking food, medicine, the right to life. We invaded 2 sovereign nations in this last decade on a premise that didn't exist. We've killed over 1 million Iraqis on their own fucking soil. And this is what we know about. Jesus Christ. Can we go into Vietnam? Should we go into Korea? Should we go into what we did in fucking China, in Russia? Should we talk about the fucking Bush Doctrine in South America? The United States has created more death, misery, starvation, rape, and murder than any other organization that has ever existed. And I am including the British Empire and Genghis Khan in this. No one has raped the earth more than the United States of America. We learned from the best, and we made it better.
I think a one thing that like really hit me on how we sort of like you guys were talking about cognitive dissonance earlier, and like a lot of the conversation around I'm gonna get her name wrong. Brittany Gardner, the NBA, a WNBA player held in Russia. Am I pronouncing
Oh,
her
I
name
don't remember her
right?
name. Yeah, I do talk. Yeah, yeah,
That's right. Yeah.
But like, and anytime anyone on the left talks about Russia, I get accused of being like a pro Putin guy. So let me just clarify, like Putin's a sack of shit and I hope the worst thing in the world happens to him.
I
But
have to do that every time I talk about Ukrainian Nazis. Like, by the way, Putin's a bloodthirsty maniac.
yeah,
I support
right.
him,
Like you
but
gotta just give it because your words just get turned around on you. But like 100%, she should be released. Like she was locked up for weed. But at the same time, like, man, if we really wanted to get black women out of jail for weed, we could do that here. Like, what are we talking about?
just a few years ago, and what's her name? The actress from Full House, right? Got busted lying and bribing officials to get her daughter into a school, and she got hit with a small fine. And yeah. And then meanwhile, an exact similar case of a woman who accidentally wrote one number wrong on her address, not on purpose, and her daughter ended up going to a different high school, was thrown in prison and guess which one was black?
Yeah. I know we like took a divergence here, but I don't think you can separate like our imperial
it's part and
actions
parcel,
from
man.
policing at home.
And here's the thing, like, it wouldn't be the Alt Left podcast if we didn't diverge on something.
I don't think it would be a podcast if we didn't diverge.
I don't even think it's tangential. I think it's right on topic. We are talking about the brutalization of people from modern American policing, and this is where we're at. Is Albuquerque Police Department. You can go on YouTube and watch videos of them hunting homeless for sport, shooting them with AR-15s. They literally hunt homeless people in Albuquerque. Los Angeles Sheriff's Department has a murder gang, and they have their own tattoos, and our sheriff has one and will not display it. Like, this is what we're dealing with. I am on. If I'm not here when this airs on Monday, you'll know why. I am going to be protecting a Planned Parenthood on Saturday because there's a fucking Proud Boy rally going to storm it on Saturday. Guess who's promoting it? Several Los Angeles County sheriffs are part of the Proud Boy brigade that's going to be storming the Planned Parenthood. The law enforcement is on the side of the fascists and always has been and always will be. And until we separate policing from policy and we tear it down and rebuild it from a system like the STAR program you're talking about, I would love to see. Look over in England, right? You go to England, you don't see cops with guns. Police have like fucking pepper spray, right? And if there's a bad situation where you need a fucking guy with a gun, they make a call to Scotland Yard, and a special fucking SWAT van will show up to a situation that requires it, and they spend the rest of the day playing fucking cards. That is what armed response should be. We should be sending out care workers and unarmed people to responses. And if an armed response is necessary, then a specialized small team can be dispatched to assess. But that requires you to care about your citizenry more than your propaganda. And that's just not American.
But the good news is the STAR program isn't the only one of these out there. I think STAR was one of the first ones, but these are happening all over the country now. And I think... I don't think the red states are going to adopt them en masse, but I guarantee you will start seeing these in blue states.
We still have red states that won't accept Obamacare money.
Yeah. And that's one of the main reasons. The other one is they don't want it. Like they don't want it. They don't care about savings. They don't care about being healthy. Anything that contradicts their worldview, they will reject outright. It doesn't matter how much. And that's part of the reason why I think you also find a lot of situations where some of these red states are the poorest in the nation. Yet they will constantly vote for rich right assholes like Donald Trump because they're not poor. They're just temporarily embarrassed millionaires.
Yeah. Donald Trump's poor.
Yep. Oh, yeah, he is.
But we could go into that one for a long while. But since we've got Joe here, we're not going to let him go because we have more in the mailbag, and Joe gets to comment on it too, since we're talking about dissension and reform.
Yeah, so we've actually been having this back and forth with E Pluribus Unum on reform versus revolutionary, right? Now, I know you weren't on the last episode. The Cliff's Notes version of this, Joe, is that he's in favor of reform. Chris and I are not, and we've been going back and forth. Now, he says a lot here, Chris, and I'm just going to put this out there. E Pluribus, you're getting a little condescending in your writing. I don't feel like we're trying to be that way towards you, and I don't know if you meant to come off this way, but this is what he says. So you had a line that he quoted. So this is how he starts. It does not happen in Latin countries. In fact, that was the worst example he could have given. Chris said that because E pluribus unum cited Latin countries as a good example where reform works. All right.
Yes, Che Guevara and Fidel Castro, the great reformers of Cuba, bringing centricism to center stage.
Yeah, and so here's the thing. He quotes that and then responds with, "I guess it was foolish of me to assume that you knew what the pink tide is." We do know what the pink tide is, and you know what happened right after the pink tide? A fucking wave of conservatism. It didn't work. And again, I'm getting aggressive here because that is the way you've written that is very condescending. We absolutely know what the pink tide is. And once again, you're giving an example of reformism not working. The goal here is that you not only have a leftist wave, but the leftist wave sticks and continues to move left. That's an example. That situation is where it's worked. So if you cite an example where you had a big leftist wave and then it immediately was countered by a huge right-wing conservative wave, well, the reform didn't work.
And can we point out that one of the reasons that happened is because of U.S. CIA intervention, which has always been the case in Latin America. Like, the thing is that communism doesn't work. It's like, no, communism has trouble standing up to CIA assassinations.
So he goes on, he's like, I'm seeing a fundamental misunderstanding of reformism. You consistently bring up compromise. Reform equals compromise, at least not to a majority of the people I have seen who adhere to reformism. Now, first of all, let me say, the reason we bring up compromise, because in a situation where you are working towards change from within, you have to compromise with the other side. If you are not compromising and you're just bulldozing over them, congratulations, you're a revolutionary, you're not a reformist. That there is no compromise in reform or in revolutionary side of things. If you're reforming, you're compromising. You're working with other groups that don't agree with you to accomplish your ends. That's why we're transposing the two.
Unless, again, you could technically have reform without compromise, but then you're talking about completely suspending the democratic process. Like, you are ending the republic and federalism. So it's like, sure, you could say that, like, no, there is no compromise. One side just got everything they wanted. And it's like, cool, but that's not democratic process. So are you saying you should step away from the democratic process? Because, again, that's a far more revolutionary ideal and doesn't seem to be where you're going with. You're talking about reform over time.
Yeah, I don't think it is, because he goes on to say the next sentence, all reformism is enacting social change through changing the system from within. It still has the same end goal, just without a bunch of dead people. And again, how are you going to change the system from within? If the system is chock full of people that completely disagree with what you're trying to do, how do you change it?
Yeah, this is something that, like, I've in the spirit of going over every topic. I was thinking a lot about with regards to Roe v. Wade being overturned and how the majority of Americans do not want it to be overturned. And basically, the Supreme Court, which is 9 unelected Ivy Leaguers, just kind of squinted at the Constitution and, like, get to decide what we're feeling today. And I, like, just thinking through how that gets resolved, I'm not sure, right? So, like, the conservative answer is like, oh, amend the Constitution. But to amend the Constitution, correct me if I'm wrong, I think you need 2/3 of the states. It's never happened that way before. And, like, it's very
actually,
circular.
You need 3/4. You need 2/3 of Congress. You need a bicameral 2/3 of Congress, and then a 3/4 of states.
Yeah. And then, of course, that brings us back to the issue of, like, well, now we're dealing with the Senate, which is undemocratic to begin with. Yeah. And also, like, is actually, like, originally, people forget this, senators weren't directly elected, right? Like, the founders thought we were all dumb pieces of shit who shouldn't get to vote on anything.
Yeah. And the president was supposed to be elected from the Senate, too.
100%. Yeah. And, like, this is all just to say, like, I think looking at the United States, I know this conversation is looking at Latin America and the pink tide, but I don't see how there is a 100% operating in the legislative system remedy for this, right? Like, I think this is going to cause severe fractures in what we think of as like the United States. Maybe, states, regions start to institute their own laws, ignoring whatever the Supreme Court says. Like, and I think this gentleman is, or whoever this is, I shouldn't assume it's a gentleman.
No,
Is
I did the same thing. We confirmed
it is?
It's
Okay.
a guy, yeah.
All
I did
right.
the same thing. He clarified for us. He's
Okay, good. And thinking about it in the sense of like revolution is when you just start shooting people, which I don't necessarily agree with. But like, I don't know. I'd love to ask this person, like, how do you see what we're dealing with in the United States, where the democratic will of the people is not only ignored, but 100% blocked from being enacted? And that's kind of the question I would pose to him.
Well, and he goes on. There's more here, so I'll keep going. And I'm getting heated at a pluribus because again, I'm inferring condescension where there may not be any. He goes on to say, most of what you said about reformism, I can easily push back to revolution. What have revolutionary leftist groups accomplished? We're going to get into that in America because we've
ended child labor.
Yeah. We've already conceded that it's more American focused convo because it is. We're talking about America and we're using examples from other countries. From all the stuff I've seen, significantly less than what reformists did. In fact, though things outside of the control, they can actually cause a net negative. One bomb is thrown at police, boom, unit crackdown. Meanwhile, quite a number of socialists have not only been elected to Congress in the U.S., not just modern day with the DSA, but have pushed massive reforms within the system. That's why the CPUSA was stamped out. Again, you're making our argument for us here because a lot of people either directly or tertiarily affiliated with them were being affected or being elected and influenced by Roosevelt's administration. If success is the issue, then I think it's the pot calling the kettle black. But here's the thing. We addressed this very point in our last response. We gave you examples of revolutionary reform. In fact, there's not a single gain that we have made on the left that hasn't been made because of violence. Period.
Yeah. Violence in the streets, fighting cops, hanging politicians. Like, we ended child labor and got overtime and weekend pay because of communist revolutionaries in this country. And you can take it outside the United States. Again, we ended slavery we ended plantation slavery in Cuba with revolution. Venezuela nationalized their own minerals and oils through revolution. The Soviet Union threw off the shackles of a czar through revolution. China ended serfdom through revolution. And again, you can be like, well, those are authoritative. Okay, the United Kingdom. You know how they got their parliament and end to the king reigning over everything? It was called the Glorious Revolution. Read a book. Like, every single change away from despotism towards anything even remotely democratic has come at the hands of violent revolution, and that is because, as Asada Shakur says, that, quoting, which, by the way, a American revolutionary in exile in Cuba, has said, nobody in the world, nobody in history has ever gotten their freedom by appealing to the moral sense of the people who were oppressing them. And that is why you cannot have reform and actual massive change that serves the people without either violence or the threat of violence. But no matter what, it cannot be done without tearing down the system, not band-aiding it.
And let's go back to the U.S. here, because the prime example, and Chris, we've talked about this before, but let's say it again. The go-to for anyone usually that's going to advocate for this is they're going to point to Martin Luther King. And while I agree with you in the beginning...
Oh, the revolutionary socialist, Martin Luther King, who said we need to overthrow the country to stop Vietnam and the oppression of the poor? Awesome.
Yeah, that one. Now,
the guy who said the white moderate reformist is the greatest villain he has? Sure, okay.
Yeah. Now, he had peaceful protests, but let's not forget he was a single person. Yes, in the beginning. And towards the end, he was ready to start burning shit down. But again, he was not the only person during the civil rights movement. We had Malcolm X. We had all kinds of other leaders too. And most of them were violent. Malcolm X is on record as saying the main reason he did what he did so violently was so that people could look to Dr. King as the alternative to his violence.
Yeah, and again, he
pointed out.
He also pointed out a big thing here, and it's often taken as fluff. Malcolm X said he will work towards liberation by any means necessary, and there's a reason he chose those words, because it also puts into perspective what's at stake, and it's really easy, right, for a oh my god, we have 4 straight white guys. It's a podcast. But like it's really easy for 4 straight cisgendered fucking white guys to sit here upon our literal Mount Everest piles of privilege and be like, well, I just don't like it when they break a window, or if someone gets hurt, or what if someone gets injured, or if the cops are this, or what if this. That's great. People of color are being murdered, raped, and lynched. Like, again, you're standing on genocidal land built on slavery in a system that is still convict leasing. And you're going to sit here and fucking cry about a Target burning down? You're the problem. Reform doesn't work, and it's easy to preach reform, and I just want peaceful. It's like, yeah, because your life is peaceful. Because me as a white man doesn't have to worry about getting fucking shot in the back when I get pulled over for a taillight because of the color of my skin. It's only going to be if he does a social media search on me. But like, I don't have to worry about that stuff because I'm straight. So people who are gay bashing and transphobes and that kind of thing, they're not going to come for me. I'm white. And so the cops are far less likely to fucking murder me. I'm a man. So I'm far less likely to get murdered in a bar for rejecting someone who wants to fuck me. Like, these are things I don't have to fucking worry about. And so it's real easy for me to be like, well, you know, slow and steady wins the race. Yeah, because I'm not suffering. But we have people of color who have to teach their kids how not to talk to cops so that they don't end up being like Tamir Rice. And how many people need to die before you go, oh, okay, well, you know, maybe we need to do this by any means necessary. And that's what Malcolm X was looking at. He was pointing out that there is zero cost that is greater than an execution of an entire class of human. And that perspective, we all of us white people and men and straight people need to be reminded that we sit in comfort on a nation that has existed for centuries on the blood and murder of queer people and people of color.
Yep. Yeah, that's well said. I don't have much to add. The only thing I'd say is, Stonewall was a riot that was not peaceful, asking for gay rights. And I don't think you can ignore the work of John Brown in Bleeding Kansas leading up to the appetite for violence to end slavery. That's all I'd say.
John Brown did nothing wrong.
Well, and I just want to wrap this up by saying, like, we just gave you a bunch of examples, and I think this is the second time we've listed a lot of these. Can you, I'll put this to you, E Pluribus Unum, can you give us any example of reformism that worked and held? Because, I mean, even in the UK and Europe right now, which is arguably more progressive than us, they're experiencing a wave of conservatism and an uprising of neo-Nazis and white nationalism. Like, it's happening everywhere.
And where that reform exists without massively oppressing other groups. Like, you can look at Canada and say, well, look at Canada. That's a progressive area that works really well on reformism. Okay, cool. Ask the native population how well that worked out for them.
Yeah.
Yeah. They're getting pulled out of church basements. Yeah.
Yeah. When you're standing on a pile of children's bones, it's real easy to say, look how high I got.
Like, the goal here, like, ultimate goal is equity and equality for all races, genders, and sexual preferences, right? The end goal is an end to poverty and suffering, hunger, homelessness, sickness, and death. Those are the end goals. I think most humans, if you talk to them in terms of those end goals, we can all agree that's what we want. Okay, reformism in a capitalist society like ours is not getting us those results. Even when we make gains, we are ultimately thrown back by an even bigger wave of conservatism and right-wing fascism after them.
Even though Antifa burned down Chicago 74 times?
Yep.
Yeah, and so, I would love to hear a rebuttal to that.
Like,
and I don't know if there is one, but we'll see.
Because every example you provided for, like, here's the thing. I'm not denying there was a big wave of communism here in the U.S. in the 1940s. And then what happened in the 50s? I'm not denying that the pink tide is something that happened. And then what happened right after it? It's like every example you've given us so far, we can point to that example being thrust backwards by a bigger wave of conservatism. Like,
the best way to know if you're correct about a historical point is if you have a historical point to make, what happened on the next page? And that will tell you whether or not you're correct or not. And always do that. Everyone, myself included. Before we go, Joe, you've been amazing. So, thank you for being here.
Of course.
Yeah.
And I want you to tell everyone where they can go to read your stuff, spread the word about you, what links, what social medias you want, and in what way can people consume what you offer that helps keep the lights on?
Yeah, definitely. So all my writing goes on my website. It's joewrote.com, JOEWROTE.com.
Sorry, hold on. I was walking the dishes. Can you say that again?
joewrote.com, JOEWROTE.com. Anything I
Joe,
write.
I'm a little slow. Can you? I was writing it down. Can you give me that one more time?
Yes, sir. joewrote.com, JOEWROTE.com.
Perfect. I think I got it.
Awesome. I think we got it that time. Yeah. Anything I write goes up there. Come hang out with me. I like to talk to my readers, engage with the audience. And of course, I'm on Twitter at Joe Mayall, JOEMAYALL. And that's mostly shit posting and yelling at the people who started the Iraq War. So,
and we will have links to all of this on our Twitter. So hang out. So everyone head to our, if you're looking for that and you're driving in the car and didn't have a chance to carve it into your arm like a knife, like a good alt left podcaster listener would, make sure to go to our Twitter and we will have links for him on there. And Joe, thanks for being here, man. This is awesome. I really appreciate your input.
Yeah, thanks guys. This was a blast. I think we had a great conversation.
Absolutely. And thanks for all you're doing. I love your writing.
Thank you.
All right, well, have a good one. And to all our listeners, thanks for sticking with us. And it was a bit of a long one, but I think you'll enjoy it. Until next week, take care of yourselves, take care of each other, and remember, the revolution, not the reform, is you.